Welcome back to DSP Leaders World Forum. It's day 5, Friday the 15th of May, and coming up now is our final session for this year, where we will be taking a very timely look at connectivity and the resurgence of telecoms in the global economy. Before we start, a quick reminder that if you want to ask questions later or join the Extra Shot with Ray LeMaitre programs, then you just about have time, but you need to do it now, or better still, once we've actually finished the panel. Details are here on TelecomTV, along with our latest poll question. And so to our panel, connectivity and the resurgence of telecoms in the global economy. Now, the global COVID-19 pandemic is resulting in massive disruption to working practices, with companies closing down their offices and requesting that their employees work from home. How has this sudden shift affected our communications networks and cloud services? Not only with work-related file transfers and video conferences, but also entertainment services, as vast numbers of consumers are instructed to self-isolate. Have our networks coped with the increase in capacity and maintained quality of service levels? And how does this affect future planning? Well, it's time to meet our guests, and I'm delighted to introduce Neil McRae, who is Chief Architect at BT, Scott Petty, Chief Technology Officer at Vodafone UK, Kerry Gilder, Chief Commercial Officer at Colt, and Matthias Fridström, Chief Evangelist at Telia Carrier. Hello everybody, thanks for joining us on TelecomTV.
Pleasure.
Hello.
Thank you.
We are going to talk about the networks and how our networks have performed. I'm delighted that we've got a panel of service providers, carriers here today. But first, I'd like to ask how your own companies have managed during this time. We talked about disruptive working practices. How have you all been able to function as CSPs in this time? Neil, let me start with you.
Sure. Hi, Guy. I think actually largely we've been able to function as we would have done. We moved pretty much about 50,000 employees across the world to work from home, both obviously predominantly here in the UK, but also we have a lot of employees in India, a number of employees in Europe and across the US. And we're running about 50,000 people VPN'd in, all working from home. We have some of our call centres still open, particularly 999. So we run 999 here for the UK. That's still something that we're doing in office with obviously all the right protections and safeguards, whilst we serve what has been increasingly an important service throughout this period. And really, we've adapted incredibly well. We moved most of our non-operational people very quickly. And then a week after lockdown started, we moved our operations centres to work from home as well. And actually that's worked reasonably well. We have challenges on build. I think building network right now is harder for sure. It's not impossible, but it is much more difficult. And our key focus as leaders now is really around health and well-being of our staff. It's a challenging time. It's also a challenging time to be kind of isolated, and some of our staff are. But there are some, extreme cases where we'd like to reopen some of our centres. For example, we have people working night shift from home. And if you can imagine working during the day when you've got kids and your dog and your family around you, if you have to work nights, that's quite challenging. So we're keen to kind of look to reopen some of our centres again with the right preparation. And then we've got our engineers on the street who are still, trying to connect things and maintain the network. Again, we've given them the right protective care to do that. We're not going into our customers' homes or our customers' offices right now. We just thought that was too difficult to try and do. But again, we're looking to see as this extends or potentially extends over the next few weeks, how we might start to figure ways out of doing that. But overall, fairly well placed to continue to work and deliver the network for our customers.
Neil, thanks for that. Kerry, how has Colt been adapting to these changing circumstances?
So I think similar to Neil, we've adapted first and foremost very quickly. Lockdowns took place over the course of literally a week and across Europe and then with Asia as well. And we were able to get laptops to people who didn't have them so that they could work from home and get Zoom licenses and Microsoft Teams licenses and all of the collaboration tool licenses out to the respective employees so we could continue on business as usual. And we did that in very short order. And with that, we actually found a serious sense of pride. We have country managers that handle each specific country as we operate in over 22 countries. And in each country, that country manager took on a dual role of being having their day job as well as having their country manager role and ensuring the employee safeguarding and welfare through that process. So I think that there was and still is a high sense of pride in regard to Colt and how we provided this sense of security and enablement and enabling the business to continue, at the same time enabling our customers who were asking us for 24-hour turnaround on 100 gig and even up to terabit upgrades.
Thanks. And Scott, what about Vodafone UK? How has your team been coping?
Very well, to be honest. We actually started to work from home a couple of weeks before the lockdown in the UK. We were able to hear from some of the other countries around the world, particularly Italy and Spain, the impacts that they were seeing through COVID-19. So we took some early steps to move people from home. We're about 96% of people at home. Just a few key security services still come to the office. We've shut all our contact centers and repurposed our retail agents as care agents and web chat agents. The first couple of weeks were very frantic, helping customers who were implementing their BCP plans and ensuring they had the capability and bandwidth they needed. But after probably 3 weeks, we started to get back into more business as usual model. We've continued to do our IT delivery plans, expanding capacity, continuing our 5G build outs where it's safe and we're able to get engineers to site. So we're back into a normal delivery mode, just with everybody at home.
Thanks. And Matthias, finally to yourself, how has Telia Carrier adapted to the changing working practices?
Yeah, no, thanks. I think we're very similar to the others. I think, we had the same thing, we sent people home, people worked from home. So practically everyone, I would say today, about 95% of our people work from home. And I think that's been okay. I really think, the first couple of weeks we were a bit, will the customer care, can they work from home? Will that work? But I think it worked out really well. I think the trick now is, of course, when this has been going on for so many weeks now, we start to employ people and, the onboarding process of a new one, when you can't meet the person in the office, when the person can't meet anyone else, that's a bit of a trick. That's where we need to sort of find new ways of onboarding people right now, because we need to grow. We need more people to handle things and so on. So I would say overall, it's gone really well, surprisingly well for everyone. And I would say, we're now in a state where we believe, everything is kind of normal, although we work from home. So I think, we coped really well.
Neil, let's move on to the networks and performance, because at the beginning of the outbreak, there was a lot of concern that the networks would be under a lot of strain, perhaps even wouldn't cope with the changing patterns and changing usage. What have you found so far?
You say there was a lot of concern. I think there was a lot of concern from the uninformed, if I may be so bold for a moment. I read many reports and thesis about how the broadband networks wouldn't cope, and I kind of read them thinking, how do they know? When we were carefully monitoring what was going on in Italy, we have BT Italia out there. We had a good understanding of the effect of people being at home, both for consumers and leisure, but also for business. So we also went back. We've got a big analytics data platform. We looked for similar days, and we discovered back in 2018 there was a big snow event here in the UK that pretty much made everybody stay at home. Schools closed for a couple of days, and we're able to understand, how the network would perform, both our broadband network and our mobile network. And when we looked at that, we were fairly confident that we'd be able to carry the traffic. In the first week, whilst the schools were still open, there was a week where the government told everybody to stay home, but it wasn't lockdown. We saw a lot of working from home, and because we run a global MPLS network in 140 countries, we understand business traffic really well. We understand the scale of it, and we were never concerned about that traffic. And actually, overall, we were able to cope with that really easily. When they announced that the schools were closing, we started to get a little bit more concerned, because whilst I think the intention was homeschooling, you've got three, as I said to my boss Howard, we've got three flavors of homeschooling. We've got learning homeschooling, we've got Netflix homeschooling, and we've got Xbox homeschooling. And we knew that there would be a big uptake in streaming and video gameplay, and that's what we saw. And to give an example, on our network, we saw roughly on the first day, we saw an increase of about kind of 52 petabytes of data transferred on our fixed network in the first day. Substantially bigger than perhaps what we expected, but still way below anything that we'd carried before. And what also happened was the traffic usage across the day widened rather than grew. So we were seeing more traffic during the day from about 8 a.m. all the way through to bedtime at 11 p.m. And we saw a few interesting patterns. We would see the traffic slow down a little bit when the government spoke, particularly when Boris Johnson made his first announcement of lockdown. And then we see consistently the traffic spike downwards for the clap for the NHS and clap for our carers moments. Fixed network would come down, but actually the mobile network would go up, and we'd see people sharing that moment, where you could hear your neighbour bang, clap and bang their pots. Quite a staggering difference. And then the mobile network, we see a lot of change in the geographical use of the network. So predominantly throughout the week, the busy places are towns and cities. Actually, that tended to change, and we saw more of our customers move back to kind of suburbia, if you will, out of the cities, and actually mobile traffic down week on week about 10%, but largely we're able to carry. Actually, during this COVID period, we've not hit a record traffic in terms of volume. Sorry, in terms of transmitted volume, we hit a record last week. With a big download of video games. And actually it's been the video game guys, predominantly Fortnite and Call of Duty, who have been putting out updates and new things for people to play that have caused a huge amount of traffic on the network. Again, we've been able to carry it fairly straightforwardly. And at this point, I probably thank DCMS and Ofcom, which are the kind of regulator and government department responsible for telecommunications in the UK. They did a lot of work coordinating between the operators and the content providers to ensure that things would continue to work, particularly home working. As our economy is affected, it's really important that those who can work from home are able to do that reliably. And we saw on our network, we've migrated, our business customers over 500,000 to our BT VPN platform. We enabled 40,000 extra VPN seats in Spain, about 20,000 in Asia, and it's been that aspect of it. Business traffic's moved from MPLS dedicated networks to kind of run over the public internet and into the big cloud providers. So huge use of Zoom, huge use of Teams, but ultimately the really big winners on this, Netflix. We've seen our biggest Netflix days by far, and then the video game guys have seen a lot of traffic. Losers, things like Instagram, you're in your house, you're not taking as many pictures. So we see a little bit of decrease in that space. But then obviously Facebook, as people want to keep in touch, we've seen a big step up of that. And then on voice, actually, voice grew for the first time in a long time. And we did actually have one or two little hiccups because voice networks have been, reducing over time. But we did see a big pickup of voice traffic initially, but that's kind of migrated to Teams and Zoom and the kind of over-the-top conferencing systems.
Thanks, Neil. Scott, Neil's given us a big overview there of different traffic types as well and applications and their usage. What have you found at Vodafone on its UK network in terms of different types of content, and also, have you had to reprovision certain network elements to sort of maintain the necessary quality of service and coverage?
Yeah, very similar traffic pattern changes. Key focus areas for us very early in the lockdown was actually voice interconnects. We saw huge spikes into fixed contact centres. We run things like NHS 111, Department of Work and Pensions contact centre. A huge amount of lift up in voice traffic, up 30% for a few days early in the lockdown. So reprovisioning capability there was important. Remanaging the mobile network, as Neil mentioned, the best place to be right now is right in the centre of our cities. There's very few people there, but there's lots of capacity. So we had to push capacity out into suburban areas and make sure that we had all the capability there. Big uptick in streaming across a broad range of platforms. Some good winners and some losers in the types of applications. Zoom really winning from a video conferencing point of view. Things like WebEx, their traffic hasn't really grown at the same level. So starting to see who customers and consumers are choosing as their products of choice.
Thanks. And Kerry, your network traffic is going to be, I guess, different to what we've just heard about. So what changes have you seen, and how has your network coped?
I'd say it's not dissimilar to what Scott and Neil stated. I mean, we've seen a huge surge in IP access, in VPN traffic, and especially in voice. If you look at voice, we had 1.8 billion minutes of traffic over our network just in March. So significant amounts of voice are coming into the ecosystem, especially with the use of Zoom and Google eMeet and Microsoft Teams. Sometimes the voice and the data connection doesn't work fantastic together. So you use your cell phone or your landline in order to make that voice interconnect. And that's where we've seen a major surge. We've also seen a major surge in two major vertical markets. So capital markets and the finance industry, we saw a massive surge in the first couple of weeks. And then, of course, we only serve enterprise. We don't do any consumer, but what we do serve is large hyperscale and cloud connectivity providers. And what we saw was upgrades, again, within 24, 48 hours, where we were required to put in 22 up to 48 100 gigs, which equates to, as we all know, 4.8 terabits of traffic, literally overnight.
Thanks. And Matthias, what has Telecarrier's experience been? Are you seeing similarities? I'm very surprised by the increase in voice, I have to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've actually seen an increase in voice as well, and as you know, Telecarrier is much more focused on the global kind of internet backbone services, and there we've seen a traffic surge from really from everywhere, really. I would say, the first 3 weeks of March, we saw an increase of about 35% in our backbone network, which is similar to what we see during a normal year. So, of course, the challenge has been, how much capacity can you build at one point in time, and I would say, this has happened a couple of years ago when you couldn't do a lot of testing in the network and you couldn't really stimulate and look where do we really need this traffic the most. We would have been guessing a lot. Today, we have these tools where we can see, what's the biggest impact right now? Where should we build this capacity? I would also say, obviously the big networks are peering a lot. There's a lot of traffic between the networks, and that's typically an argument you can have for months and years between operators. The good thing this time was that was absolutely taken out. People said, let's upgrade. Let's make sure that traffic can flow between these networks. without even discussing commercials around that or where should that happen. It just happened. People really said, let's fix this. Let's make sure the big networks are covering this traffic and can take care of it. And I think that was a really new thing. Then, similar to what the others said, every day is a Sunday these days. Sundays are typically the day when you have the most traffic, and it starts early in the afternoon. That happens now absolutely every day. It didn't happen before, but when people start to consume services already 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's a big change to what we've seen before. And also the last fact that I'll talk about is that we actually start to see that the US traffic and the Europe traffic on the big backbone of internet actually starts to come together at some point in time. The peak in traffic in Europe in the evening kind of is now filled up with another traffic peak from the US in the afternoon. So that's something we've never seen before as well. So a lot of things have changed, but I think the networks have coped really well. There are still parts of our network where we would like to build out more, and we need to build out more, but I would think overall we've done well.
Kerry, do you think the recent months has changed the perception of the importance of networks and the importance of connectivity? Because, for the past few years, we've kind of been downplaying connectivity. We've done it, it's boring, we're all looking at digital services. But at the heart of it, the reliance upon especially our broadband networks has been phenomenal.
I'd say that we have a hashtag saying here at Colt, connectivity matters. And I think what we've seen in this pandemic era is that it really does matter, and we are seen as critical infrastructure. And I think that the governments around the world, the businesses around the world, and the consumers around the world now know that this situation and this virus would be very different if we had to deal with it like they did back in World War II or back during the Spanish flu, when they didn't have the ability to do a Zoom call, to connect via voice with a friend or family member as you're in isolation. So I do believe that it has raised the reputation of the telecom industry, and I don't think that that's going to go away anytime soon. I know that Scott and Neil and Matthias stated that the volumes of traffic have changed. We're seeing the same thing, but the other thing that we're seeing is the requirement for on-demand and flexible services and these new abilities that are coming to the table with software-defined networking. So I believe that there will be continued innovation that will enable that reputation of telecom to remain very high in the years to come after a anecdote is provided out to the greater society.
Indeed. Scott, whilst we are trying to maintain the provision of networks, make sure nothing goes wrong there, is it also a chance for us to learn and look at lessons that we can apply in how we provision networks moving forward, types of services that are going to be in more demand?
I absolutely think so. It's very unlikely we'll go back to the way things were before this pandemic. Companies will reevaluate their need for contact centers, for bringing everyone to large buildings. They'll have a much more flexible way of working, and that will demand more flexible networking services, the way they configure those services, and the quality of service they offer very much to the end of the network. I think you'll see in enterprise, for instance, a desire to be able to buy very high quality connectivity to the home that can be self-configured. They'll look at different types of applications for democratizing people that are working from home versus the ones that are working in offices. And that's going to create a whole set of new opportunities across our industry for both business and consumer. And
Neil, can I ask you the same question I've just asked Scott there about, is this a chance for us to reflect on how we provision and what we provision?
I think so. I think it's maybe reinforced some of the thinking that we had. So, we use AI with path computation to decide how we set up paths across the network. And we're able to very quickly change some of those paths to think more about over the top. I think our ability to, and the value of that's been seen across our business. I think increasingly using that capability and investing in that capability will certainly be helpful. I'm going to be slightly more skeptical than Scott about what this change will bring. We've done a lot of thinking about this, and personally, I studied the environment of work many years ago at Sloan MIT, and what we find is that human contact, seeing someone close to you, is super important. And there's a formula called the Allen curve that basically says the less you see someone measured in steps, actually how many steps someone is away from you, the less likely you are to communicate them. And it's a really important piece of work that I saw firsthand. I went to Boeing and saw how this had affected them and why the 787 Dreamliner was so late. And I went to BMW, who conversely, because of where they positioned people, were able to reduce recalls by in the millions of issues with their cars. So, having seen that evidence, I'm slightly skeptical about how well this works on an ongoing basis. I think the fact that we're all at home and we're all on Teams works really well. I think when we go back to that mixed environment of some people being at home or out and about and some people being in the office, I think we'll start to think about things differently again. So I think there are definitely things to be learned about being more flexible and empowering that and be ready for that. But I also think we've still got a lot to learn. For me, it feels like we're in the middle of the storm right now, in the eye of the storm. And when we come out the other side of this, if we ever come out the other side of this and what that looks like, I think we've got much more to learn. And I think as we went into this, in telco, Guy, I've talked to you about transformation for years. And transformation, for the most part, is about our staff, our colleagues, and how we work with them and how they work together. Interestingly, we saw the biggest transformation the world has ever seen happen in days. And if you were to say to me, hey, Neil, we're going to do this sort of transformation across the whole of BT, we'd have a planning cycle of 3 years to do that sort of transformation. And what was different about it was the compelling story. We have to do this. And by the way, as telecommunications providers, we've got such an important part to play in the fitness of our country. We've got to make this work. And when our colleagues and my team and the teams that we have across our industry saw that, this was a no-brainer. And I think as leaders, and certainly for me personally as a leader and a manager, I learned a lot through that period. Still always more to learn when you're a leader. You never stop learning. But from my point of view, I'm open to learn more about how we take this forward. But I'm really reluctant to make any big bold statements about how things might be, having seen such a tremendous change happen in such a short space of time, Guy.
Thanks. Kerry, just echoing what Neil said, that there has been a tremendous rate of transformation in a very, very short time. Does this show us what's possible? Does this show us to an extent that actually we can do more? We can certainly go faster if the situation demands it.
I think that's one of the big learnings that we've had throughout this, is that as the compelling event came towards us, to Neil's point, we had to respond. And essentially, this isn't a war by any means, but we were the soldiers that were part of the soldiers that were out there in the field, making sure that the critical infrastructure was up and running in order to enable the communication by the doctors, by the healthcare workers, by the government, by UK Parliament here in the UK, to ensure that those sessions could still exist, but exist in a different way than they had before. And I think as that event took place, what we saw is that we could break down some of the processes, we could remove some of the approvals, we could enable and make people give some ownership to some people that maybe are at a lower level in the organization, and that ultimately empowered the people that were in the field to enable pretty heroic acts to happen in a very short amount of time. Now, the question is, how can we bottle some of those learnings up and then transform our business on a day-to-day basis post-pandemic to ensure we're providing that same differentiation as an industry as we move forward. And I think a big part of that is collaboration. Scott talked about the interconnects and the breakdown of those very long discussions that have to take place sometimes. I think what we'll start to see is a larger use of AI. We'll start to see a larger mutual engagement around APIs and software capabilities, and an understanding that not one operator in any part of the world will be able to provide the entire ecosystem for our users. And so because of that, we need to work together and come together just like we did during the pandemic.
And Scott, it's unfair to demand a postmortem now, because we are still right in the middle of this around the world, and the time for that later. But is there anything immediately that struck that the industry as a whole could have done better? We could have been better prepared for, or we've got to make sure we get this right if there's a next time. We hope there isn't.
Look, I think overwhelmingly we did a really good job as an industry, and to pick up the point that a few people have made, the collaboration was really fantastic. I think the way we worked together as competitors to solve problems, and working with the regulators and the government to ensure that we got through the early peak part of the period was really fantastic. And we're in a new normal that networks are functioning very well, and we're able to continue to deliver. Probably the only area that surprised all of us was the big spike in voice traffic in those first couple of days, and we saw 10 years worth of growth in 3 days. So if I was being harsh on our teams, we could have potentially planned for that a little bit better, had more interconnect capacity in place. That said, we responded incredibly well as an industry, and all of those initial problems were gone within the first 2 or 3 days.
Thanks. Matthias, what did we do well as an industry collectively, and were there any areas that actually we ought to look at, and we ought to make sure that maybe we perform a little bit better?
Yeah, no, I agree with the others. I think the collaboration has been really, really good, and I think the fact that we simply had to turn up a lot of traffic within very short time. I think we came up with loads of new things and new ways of working, and working much better with each other, and didn't discuss the terms into details and so on. So I think overall we handled this really well. I think one part of the world where I see we could have done a lot better is on the supplier side. I think many suppliers of gears have been very dependent on a very few suppliers on their turn. And one supplier, having buying components really everywhere, suddenly saying, we're absolutely out of components from Thailand because Thailand have closed, and therefore we can't really do anything more. I think that's what our industry need to look at. Currently, I think there is a huge demand from all operators around the world on the suppliers to buy more equipment, more routers, more switches, more DVDM equipment, more everything. And I think there is an undersupply right now. We all fight about the same gear, and I think part of this is because some of the suppliers have been a bit too greedy to get the lowest cost, and therefore source everything from one supplier, and feeling we're safe, they can supply us forever. And I think now, when countries are closing, when borders are closing, a lot of that struggled, and we were not really prepared for that. We kind of felt, we're a global economy and everything is global. What happened now was a lot of things became national, and that really, I think most of us struggled with, can we send people to that place to install something? Probably not. Can we buy from this supplier? Maybe not. So I think, that's something we need to look over when we're out of this, to see, how do we source equipment, and how do we make sure that we at all times can buy equipment?
I'd like to ask all of you a question about the future, really. None of us can predict the future. It's almost impossible to work out what's going on next week, let alone next month or next year. But in terms of connectivity and our networks, are there any areas that we perhaps need to focus on more, or more provision? I mean, do we need more subsea cables? Do we need more satellite? Is in-building connectivity a bottleneck? Are there any areas that we may want to double down on? Neil?
Absolutely. Clearly, here in the UK, despite all our efforts, there are still some people who don't have the best broadband that they should have. And actually, last Thursday, BT announced a £12 billion investment in FTTP. And that is very much to augment and make our network even better, and also a substantial amount of that going into rural locations. We still have too many not spots, and our vision in BT is to make those not spots go away over the next 5 to 10 years. It's challenging. We need government help. We need regulator help. We need cross operator alignment, which we've made massive progress on just in this past year on shared rural network. But there's much more to do, and I can't help but think if there is one thing that will change out of this, people's patience for us as operators to reach out to them is probably a lot shorter than it once was. And actually, we have a team, part of my team, I kind of took them off what they were working on to start thinking about, when we come out of this, what are the springboard opportunities for us as BT and our industry that we can get really, build on the momentum of this crisis to really start to underpin them. And definitely for one of them is network construction. But I actually see probably the brightest future for telecommunications than I've seen in the last 10 years. And the last time we were in this kind of situation was after the banking crisis. And again, we used that as a springboard at BT for our FTTC build out across the UK. So I'm very optimistic about this. There's a lot still to do in 5G, and we've got a lot going on in that as well. I think there is, the one area to study is probably a bit more around what if sport had continued. In some respects, sport is a massive user of the network in terms of spectating, and as the lockdown reduces and sport comes back, clearly we've still got some challenges up ahead of us to ensure that we can service that. So understanding that and studying it more is clearly something that we need to do. And then I think, we've probably got a lot to digest around certain pinch points and certain things with our partners around how things perform well. Actually, our network partners, I heard what Matthias said. Actually, I couldn't disagree more strongly. Our network partners really stretched out for us, and I'm super proud of all of them. And actually, I gave them a lot of recognition in some comms that we put out. And we need to build on that and again build those partnerships ever more stronger.
Thanks. And Scott, where should we focus moving forward to improve connectivity? Are there any areas that really need extra attention?
Yeah, not really from a technology point of view, but I think from our role in society, it's very clear there's going to be a very significant economic impact as we come out of this crisis, and that means large parts of the community will struggle to be able to afford to stay connected, and that's really important that we find ways to make that happen, either by closing not spots or giving them payment windows, holidays in their services, so that they can continue to stay connected to the world. I think the social contract that telecommunications builds now with the rest of society is really, really important. We're fortunate we're in an industry with services that everybody needs. We have a subscription model that people pay for. Many other industries and therefore their employees are in a much more difficult situation. I think as an industry, we need to lean in and help the economy recover.
Great, thanks. Matthias, what about your views as to where we can focus on now in terms of improving our connectivity and improving our relationship with our users?
Yeah, no, I actually think what Scott and Neil said it's absolutely correct. And I also think, one thing that's going to happen now is I think we've kind of in Europe at least done a very big live test around, can everyone work from home? And I think we came to the conclusion that everyone can work from home. And I know at least here in Sweden, the discussion has started, do we need these big offices in the major cities, or should we have half of the people working from home all the time? And that is, of course, a big thing for the operator to think about, instead of building huge connectivity blocks to big buildings in the major cities, we need to think about, how can we support the countrysides with much better connectivity so that people can actually work from there most of their time, really. So I think that's going to be a big thing. But I think, as people have said before, we really need to make sure that everyone have a great connectivity. Everyone needs a good connection right now, and I think governments have seen that, and I'm sure there will be programs going on in most of the countries right now. How do we build out to the last amount of people that doesn't have anything like this. Their operators really need to think, how do we do this in the best way?
Thanks. And Kerry, final word to yourself. How can we improve our connectivity offerings and any other aspect of our business?
Again, I think we've heard the word a couple of times, but one of the words that I think is important for us in the future is flexibility. I think we'll see more flexible working structures. We'll see a different aspect of mobility in our user base, and we will have to respond accordingly. So Scott talked about subscription models. I would like to talk about on-demand and consumption-based models. And I think that we as an industry will have to move to those consumption-based models in other areas of the business, including B2B and enterprise interconnects as well. And we are already doing that at Colt with our on-demand service. And one of the things that we found is that it enabled remote hands. And I think that's one learning that is going to definitely move on from this as far as research and development, but it's around those remote hands. What are the type of capabilities that we can offer to our users that can happen remotely? And because of that, I think we'll see an acceleration in cloud. And I also think we'll see different use cases come to the table in regard to 5G and specifically edge.
Great, Kerry, thank you very much. And to all of you, in fact, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Thank you. If you have any questions for our guests or any additional comments or views you wish to add, then please do get in touch with us. And if you want to be part of the ongoing conversation, then you need to join us on our brand new discussion programme, Extra Shot. Get in touch with us now through social media or email, but you do need to act quickly. Otherwise, please take a look at the sessions that we've already held. They are all available for on-demand viewing now, right here on TelecomTV. And we'll be adding this final session to the archive later today. Coming up next on DSP Leaders World Forum 2020 is our final programme, a look back at the week with my editorial colleagues, Ray Lemaitre and Chris Lewis. And you'll be able to watch that later today from 12 noon UK time. But for now, a final thank you to our panellists and to you for watching. Thank you and goodbye.